everyone. Thank you for joining us for this panel discussion on undergraduate research in behavioral science at USC. This event is organized by the Price School of Public Policy and the Behavioral Science Society, which is the organization of students and postdocs that is affiliated with USC's Behavioral Science and Wellbeing Policy Initiative. Today's host is undergraduate student Katherine Winn, who is a senior studying business administration with a minor in communication policy and law. She's on the pre-law track and plans to go into the data privacy field in her future career. And as part of the USC Marshall Honors Program, she wrote an undergraduate thesis, "Do Not Sell My Personal Information or Accept Cookies: Effects of Cookie Banners on Consumer Perceptions and Decisions." Welcome, and Katherine, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for joining us today and for the introduction, Wendy. Today we'll be covering how to get involved in research as an undergraduate with our panelists. Our first is Amulya Donthi, undergraduate student at the Marshall School of Business; Oskar Muller, research assistant at the USC Center for Economic and Social Research; and Andrew Dawson, graduate student at the USC Mind and Society Center. Throughout this panel, please utilize the question and answer function at the bottom if you have any thoughts or questions, and we'll cover these at the end of the panel. Panelists, please introduce yourselves and your experience with research.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amoya. Like Katherine mentioned, I'm a senior studying business administration with minors in social entrepreneurship and designing for experiences. I am from the San Francisco Bay Area, and the way I've been involved in undergraduate research is also the Marshall Honors Program, where I had the opportunity to write an undergraduate thesis. My thesis is titled "Truth versus Tokenism: An Analysis of the Impact of Diversity Representations in College and University Promotional Materials." And so this was within the marketing division of the Marshall Honors Program, and I got a really great opportunity to independently conduct this thesis, involving not only ideating what the thesis was about from the very beginning, but also creating the study design, ultimately writing the thesis at the end, and then being able to submit it to journals and other awards. So I look forward to answering any of your questions and talking a little bit more about the work that I've done at USC and the research that I've been involved in.
Hi, my name is Oskar Muller. I graduated from USC in the fall of 2019 with a degree in economics. I'm from right outside of Chicago, and I am currently a research assistant at the Center for Economic and Social Research. The way that I got there was kind of a little roundabout way. While at USC, I was really interested in politics, and I got myself a student staffer job at the Center for Political Future. But after a while, I knew that I was really into economics and behavior in that whole field. And I really was interested in the polling specifically that the Center for Economic and Social Research was doing. So a position for a research assistant opened up, and I dove right in and did a lot of throughout 2019, did a lot of the political polling data for them, worked on a lot of the things like top line programs and all that sort of good stuff. And then after graduation, I worked for Live Nation, which, if you don't know, that's the parent company of Ticketmaster. And so for a few months, I worked on a lot of these concert tours, setting ticket prices. And then during COVID, when all that was shut down, I came back to my research position at Center for Economic and Social Research, where I've been doing a lot of work and research on different COVID behaviors, did a little more of the political polling. And again, that's kind of my big interest, is kind of macro sets of behavior and seeing people's behavior patterns and attitudes shifting over time. And I haven't, working there has been really nice, and having a lot of both things that they're already doing and also a little bit of original research. But yeah, thank you for having me, and I'm excited to be here.
Hi, my name is Andrew Dawson. I'm a graduate student at the Mind and Society Center under Dr. Daphne Oyserman. I did my undergraduate degree in human bio and pre-med at UC San Diego. And while I was there, I had the privilege of being able to work as a undergraduate research assistant under Dr. Pineda and in the cognitive neuroscience lab, where I got to run participants and we were studying facial lateralization and autism. And, I have somewhat of an unorthodox path into graduate school. I actually went out into industry for a number of years. I worked as an early employed in non-invasive cancer sequencing startup, where we did blood-based liquid biopsy, which was somewhat unrelated to my undergraduate research. After that, I ended up at Google for a few years, and I worked on in their stealth group doing high-altitude pseudosatellites. So I was a business partner there. And then afterwards, I actually left and started my own augmented reality development company. And so we did some of the first augmented reality marketing campaigns on head-mounted display, like the HoloLens. And the claim to fame was that we had, 50 people running around, the Middle East and Japan with HoloLenses doing, consumer-facing marketing. And this was in 2017. So this is far, far, far before AR and VR really took off. And the question is, well, then how did I end up back here? When we were designing and developing these products, I became intimately interested in implicit identity frames. And what that means is that I was basically priming an identity and then providing content that would be, fluent or as expected with this identity. And it was creating really productive marketing experiences. People really enjoyed them. And so I started to ask, well, how is this working? And I came to find Dr. Daphne Oyserman's work in the Mind and Society Center, where she studies identity, and really decided that I wanted to answer some of the harder questions of identity and marketing. And so actually now that's what I'm working on at the Mind and Society Center. And so, I'm welcome to answer questions about research and the academic path, as well as relevance to industry. And then, I'm also a TA right now, as well as a project manager on the IES Goal 3 grant. And what that means is we have an educational intervention we're running for about 10,000 students in Chicago. And we're starting next year in Nevada, where we're going to be running about 5 times that many students. Every student in Nevada will receive our intervention. So also educational psychology. If you have any questions about educational research, happy to answer them.
Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourselves. As you can see, we have a wide range of research in this panel. So let's get started with some questions. What are the benefits of getting involved with research as an undergraduate?
Yeah, I can start on this one. Getting involved in research as an undergraduate kind of really, for me at least, it connected kind of like with all this theoretical cool stuff that I heard about, like coming into college, and really got me a lot of exposure to a lot of new skills and trains of thought that I'd never encountered before in my life. Those kind of lessons and skills really stick with you. And when you're entering the job market, people are actually really interested in that stuff. If you're doing real world applications of theories and conducting your own research, I know that when I interviewed for a job, they're really interested and asked a lot of what I was doing and what I was interested in, and any, again, original research that I was looking into. And it's just kind of doing a bunch of that research as an undergrad really kind of pushes you in the right direction of how to move forward and use all these skills to, again, make your own mark on the world and really dive into things that you're personally fascinated in, if you haven't found an avenue for that already.
Yeah, kind of seconding what Oskar said about how undergraduate research really allows you to get the hands-on experience for everything that you're learning in your classes. I found that was definitely true for me. And it was also really great because I got to hone in on specifically what I was interested in and use the skills that I learned in my classes in order to devise a thesis and undergraduate research and to execute it. And so without that, it would have been several other years in the workforce or a graduate program that I would have to be into in order to really get to this point in my research. But because I had the opportunity to do undergraduate research, I was able to get a leg up over other individuals and really study what I liked and get more insight into what I want to do in my future and if research is the right path for me.
Yeah, I would excuse me, I would echo that. I would also say that, what I heard from Oskar that I liked as well is that it makes school more relevant, right? It's that you're learning all these ideas and notions, but you don't really have a test bed to apply it. And so being able to have that opportunity to understand that not only school is relevant to your future, but research is relevant to your future. And then understanding, again, that you're accruing the skills and abilities that you can apply in a variety of different domains. And that, even sometimes the topic of the research may feel irrelevant to what you're doing, but you're always going to garner skills and a way of thinking and a way of structuring how you're asking questions and how you're solving them that you can apply to a variety of domains, right? So I worked as an undergraduate doing brain imaging, but then when I went to the labor force, I worked in a wet lab, and then ultimately, ending up in social psychology. And though they seem to be very divergent and disparate domains, the way of thinking and and scientific method and empiricism is really conserved across all of those. And so, don't be scared to get involved because the research may seem to be irrelevant. It will pretty much never be irrelevant. And so that's I encourage people to be open-minded to what they are looking at.
Thank you for that. I definitely agree with all that's been said. I feel like conducting research has definitely given me a skill set I didn't get from my original classes at USC. Thank you all for sharing. So what kind of behavioral research science are undergraduate students involved in at USC or just in general at the undergraduate level? Like what's out there for them?
So I can give a couple of examples. At the Mind Society Center, we have a few different lines of research, right? So we have research on fake news and disinformation, so perceptions of truth. Research assistants there will often prepare materials, help design studies, and then help run studies, which is actually quite exciting. So you get firsthand experience and knowledge end to end, basically from theory to materials preparation to design and to actually implementing. And then if you're interested in doing honors theses, you actually can do that on your own. I think Amulya can talk about that more. And that's a really fantastic opportunity. And I think USC does an excellent job of offering that. In the UC system, it's a little bit harder to really get into that, to break into it, and the scale of it makes it more difficult. An example for what we're doing right now, I have a fantastic research assistant, and we're working on adapting and translating materials for educational intervention to make them more accessible to minority populations and populations that wouldn't have access, right? So right now we're translating English to Spanish, and then we get to go into the theoretical implications of the work, and then how we're operationalizing and concretizing them, and then how are we translating them appropriately for the target audience. And so that's a really valuable skill set for when she wants to go into the workforce. She has, or into social work, which is what she wants to do now. She has a really concrete, demonstrable skill and project that she's delivered on. And so these are just two examples that I wanted to offer, and there are plenty more outside of just psychology. And I'm sure that the other two panelists can talk about those.
Yeah, Andrew kind of hit the nail on the head about like the opportunities that are available to undergraduate students. Personally, I can only speak to my experience doing an undergraduate honors thesis. Even this honors thesis is relatively underrated. A lot of individuals don't know about it. And mostly every school at USC offers an undergraduate honors thesis program. And so if you are eligible to it, I would say definitely apply and have the opportunity to do it. It may seem kind of daunting that it's a lot of work, but it genuinely is worth it. And you get a lot of time to learn the process of research and work along the way in order to learn by doing. And that was a really, really helpful skill for me. Additionally, what I learned through the undergraduate honors thesis program is that all professors and faculty at USC are really interested in research and understanding how to make their fields better. So if there's anything that you as an undergraduate feel that is really important to research that you care about, you can always take it to a faculty member that is involved in research and talk about starting your own research. And a lot of the times they will be willing to point you in the right direction or even take it up themselves in order to find a way to get you to that point where you can conduct research yourself. So even if there aren't the right opportunities out there for you currently, you can definitely make them yourself at USC, and it's very possible.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to what was already said, but when you're at a school that is so large and has as many resources as USC, I tend to think that if there's something you're really interested in doing, if there's something that you're really interested in creating, that there's the staff, the faculty, and the resources to kind of do that. And you just kind of have to push yourself to really actualize what you're passionate about.
I would like to highlight a point that Amulya made about what I heard. One thing that she touched on was perspective and diversity in an indirect way, right? Like undergraduate students, I think, underestimate what they bring to the table. And historically, right, like I only have one perspective, and diversity is incredibly valuable. And so for undergraduate students to understand that they may not know all the methods, they may not know all the theory, but they made it to USC, they're qualified, they're competent, they're capable, and they have a unique perspective that they can bring to the table and actually really enrich a lab. And so, I would really like to encourage undergraduate students to put themselves out there a little bit and find opportunities because they really do have things to contribute. And, one of the goals of the Academy is to really diversify the talent pool. And we can't do that without young minds, getting involved in research.
Thank you for that. It's definitely intriguing to delve into the different layers of research and what really exists at the undergraduate level. So on that note, what kind of jobs can you get with research experience? I know, Oskar, you talked a little bit about how research helped your interviews and stuff, but what kind of work can you do with that?
I think that there's really a lot of things that you can do with it, because I think that the most important thing from research may not be the topic or the conclusion of what you're looking at, but it's just kind of just knowing what goes into like making good work, like attention to detail. And again, that just, I'll hit this point home. It's just like the genuine interest in whatever you're doing. So yeah, for me, I didn't do any research on the music industry, and yet when I interviewed, all of like the lessons that I had learned throughout my time as a research assistant were really valuable, and it kind of really did help me, not only in terms of like the actual skills, like working with spreadsheets and coding, but just again the attention to detail, the making sure that when you're doing something, it's something you produce work that you have pride in, and just kind of all those little lessons really. You can apply to almost any job. And that's why I think that research is so critical to do when you're an undergrad.
Yes, thank you for that. And Amulya, going a little bit back to your undergraduate thesis, you mentioned it being a bit daunting, and I know we're in the same program together. Can you speak a little bit about that process, what it was like, the idea generating, and how that kind of formulated into your thesis, and what that process was like for you?
Of course. So the undergraduate honors thesis program, at least at Marshall, is a 2-semester long program. So starting at the second semester of your junior year and the first semester of your senior year. So the first semester of your junior year the second semester of your junior year, first semester of the thesis program is just dedicated to idea generation, learning about research methods, and really honing in on what it is, the topic that you're interested in. And so Katherine, both of us, we started out with lots of disparate interests, trying to figure out how we could really study very, very big ideas. And over the course of the semester, we were able to learn how to narrow it down and how to create conceptual maps and how to better understand how to ask a narrowed research question that really focuses on one niche in a research subject. And from that point, we were able to do things like literature reviews, and even at the end of that first semester, write a rough draft of our undergraduate research thesis. And then the second semester, or the first semester of your senior year, is just dedicated towards doing more of the study design and actually executing and writing the thesis. And so you get the entire semester to be able to do this. And the thesis advisor for us, Professor Deal, was really incredible in leading us through the process and teaching us everything there is to know about how to conduct a research study, the most effective ways to do it, especially when things transitioned to be completely online because of COVID. We were able to work with that as well, using tools like Amazon's Mechanical Turk in order to get participants for our research studies, and dealing with the IRB or the review board for all of these studies as well. There's a lot of things that you may not know going into the thesis program, but it equips you really well to learn all of it while you write your thesis. And when you come out of it, you will be much more knowledgeable about the entire research process and can go on to do your own research in the future with much more knowledge under your belt.
Yes, thank you. You definitely covered a lot of bases with that. I think the entire length of the year definitely, as an undergraduate, really helps you kind of understand what research is, how to do it, and then actually do it yourself. So it's kind of accelerated what research is, but USC definitely does a good job of helping students with that. So we've heard a little bit about undergraduate research. And Oskar and Andrew, what is it like to work as a research assistant or becoming a PhD student? Can you speak a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm not sure how similar everyone's research assistant experience is, but for me, it's really just kind of doing all the little things, which may not seem super interesting or super fun, but if you're in a field or if you're in a department that does a lot of work that you really connect with, then it really is a great use of time. So a lot of it was just kind of collecting different things. Like if there's a big question that we're trying to answer, just kind of like looking back to see, like, has that been answered already? What are the different ways it's been answered? Is there a new way to approach whatever we're looking at? And I think a lot of it is just also I think it's really important if you're a research assistant to get like a nice routine going and feel comfortable with whoever you're working with and just kind of ask a lot of questions. So again, that's kind of been my experience, just doing all those little things, asking questions on like trying to prepare myself so I can do similar things in the future on my own. But yeah, so that's kind of what it is. It's making sure that you're being helpful and you can kind of provide a lot of resources that will push the work forward. And yeah.
On the graduate side, it's, I would say that being a PhD student is like being a glorified RA in the best ways, right? You're a little bit more independent. You're responsible for everything, end to end. So you're responsible for your design, your preparation, your execution, and then your own analysis. And then depending on how your relationship is with your PI, you meet with a certain frequency, and they're either hands-on or hands-off, and that's, to your own preference. But then again, you get to also TA. And so it really, it's a fantastic experience because you have all the intellectual freedom and flexibility, and then you also get to apply directly and practice your pedagogy. And so, it's just like being an RA, and that's why it's important to be an RA, because you can accrue the skills that are comparable and honed throughout the PhD, but then B, you really get to understand how the academy functions, and then if it's something you want to do now, later, or never, right? And so a lot of students go from being an RA, graduating into a doctoral program, and then a lot of students take a break like I did. And I can say now that I really appreciate the PhD, I think a lot more in some ways, and the intellectual freedom, because I didn't have it for a period. And so, go be an RA, because it will give you the skills to become a graduate student if you decide that's what you want to do.
Thank you for that. That definitely covered a bit of basis, hopefully, for the audience about what you can do with it. And so one more question. What did any of you know about research before going into the field, or what surprised you when you first started? Were there any myths or things you thought about that did not end up being true, or what was that like?
So I can start on that. Personally, for me, one thing that I didn't know was that how broad research was in general. So, for example, I live with a bunch of pre-meds, and so all of the research they do is very, very different than the research that I was doing. So I kind of looked at it as if this is some type of research that I can never be involved in simply because I don't have the technical experience or the knowledge to be able to conduct in-depth research like that. But going into the actual process of writing my own thesis and doing my own research, I realized that research itself is an extremely broad field, and that it can be as technical as you want or as least technical as you want. And there is a lot of space in between for everyone's research questions and everyone's interest. And specifically with mine, I really didn't think that being able to study the intersection of business and marketing and diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that would even be possible. But formulating the right research question and the right research study, I was able to do it very effectively. So it just takes a little bit of time to better understand what your research is about and what niche you're in and how to write a good research question. But from that point, really anyone can get involved in research if they want to.
Yeah, and I think piggybacking off of that is just that when you're doing research, if there's again something that you're interested in, you can kind of create your own little question to answer. I remember last year I did a whole paper analysis, seeing if there's any link to different people's like personality traits and the way that they voted. And even though that there wasn't anything super substantial that I found, it was just, I had never thought that I could kind of create my own research question like that and kind of just take the time to just sit down and do all this analysis and regression. So that's, I think, my biggest takeaway from my experience as when I was an undergrad research assistant is that you can really kind of have that own intellectual creativity that you don't really get in a lot of other places.
Yeah, I'll echo what the other two panelists said in that, it suggested that, the only people that are creative, are musicians or artists, and that you're really, or designer, right? And that scientists aren't creative. And then, coming in, especially to a field that's as broad and dynamic as psychology, you really have the freedom to be creative. For example, I have to create, stimuli and do Photoshop and then, operationalize constructs in ways that are novel. And for example, right now we're studying cultural fluency, and it's this idea about when things appear the way I expect them to, I reason in a sort of mindless way, for lack of a better word. And when things appear in a way I don't expect them to, it makes me think a little more. And so, one of my studies recently was going through and picking out Christmas wreaths that are atypical on Etsy, right? And so I found, and they're not ugly, they just look a little bit different. And some of the preliminary findings show that, if you see a Christmas wreath that doesn't look as you expect it to, you really don't like the ad that you see that's unrelated. So you see an ad for a toothbrush, coming up next. And so there are things like that I would have never believed if you had told me before I started working deeply in social psychology. And it gives you a creative outlet, and then also a way to intellectually engage, which I think is really unique to research and to empiricism in the academy that you don't get in other domains.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's a really interesting finding about not liking the ad just based upon the wreath that you see. I've never guessed that. Yeah, I think touching a bit upon that, in terms of the intellectual creativity you mentioned, Oskar, I think there's kind of a mix up at the undergraduate level between the research that we have done for our classes for those small individual research papers versus doing actual research, such as the thesis I did. And I think that mix up kind of what deters students away from research is because a lot of the research you do for your classes or your papers are kind of dull because it's not your interest. It's not what you want to do with it. It's for an assignment. However, when it now becomes your research and your area of interest, you can spend hours online doing your research, writing that thesis. And I think like when you're able to write about a specific area that you're intrigued in or something that interests you, it really helps you find a passion in research. That's what I found through writing my thesis as well. Thank you all for sharing. So another question, what are some insights you've gained from conducting research, whether that be about your area of interest, your research techniques, or just personal skills?
Yeah, I feel like just first of all, just in terms of like hard skills, like I never really coded before. I never used any like stats programming. Because when I kind of started all this, all I did was econ and poli-sci classes and hadn't really gotten super deep into that. So just kind of not small skills, but like actual like resume skills like that. I feel like I've gotten pretty proficient in. And again, it's kind of not to again say the same thing over and over again, but it's like I didn't realize how interesting analyzing behavior was, and that there's so many different ways to categorize people based on their activities, their beliefs, different perceptions that they have, and just kind of realizing that there's an infinite amount of ways to kind of break down like large populations of people and kind of like use that information in a productive way for whatever you want to do, whether it's selling wreaths and toothbrushes or doing a bunch of behavioral analysis. That it's kind of what you want to make of it.
So personally for me, I am going into product management after I graduate. And so research gave me a lot of skills that'll be very helpful in that field, specifically because product management and consumer-facing product management is really focused on understanding what your consumer wants and then asking the right questions, like devising surveys and user experience research in order to create the best products and features for your consumers. And so with my research, I really learned a lot of those skills on how to ask the right targeted questions to get individuals to give me the insights that I wanted. And then further, like Oskar mentioned, how to actually analyze those results. So from just my business major, I learned like basic statistical skills. But with the research, I was able to learn more softwares, for example, SPSS, which gave me more insights into how to analyze large swaths of data and how to garner really important data from that, that I could draw conclusions from that would help inform any future decisions that I would be making. So I'm sure I'll definitely be using those skills when I go into the workforce and need to get more research on what my consumers want. And now I'll know exactly how to do that and how to approach those situations.
Yeah, I do want to say that in terms of product management, one other thing that the Academy affords you is the ability to translate, right? In product management, one of the challenges is to translate between a bunch of different counterparties with varying technical backgrounds and expertise. And really what the Academy does is it allows you to go very deeply into the esoteric and then to work in those theoretical fields, to concretize them, to evaluate new ideas, and then to bring them back, translate them, and disseminate them in a way that supports society and helps. And so, in the product management I've done, now I have a much better sense of my shortcomings through working as a graduate student. But the other insight that I've really garnered is that the fields are all immensely deep. There's so much depth. And if you have an interest, somebody is researching it and somebody is working on it. And, and that has really just stunned me, going through the different fields of psychology. There's sensory marketing, focusing on scent. There's people focusing on the texture of the floor in the department store, right? There are, people doing behavioral economics, and then there's also, a lot of different assumptions for different theories within the same field, right? And that has been quite insightful for me. For example, there's personality psychologists that believe that personality is fixed, and then there's more social psychology that believes that context shapes how people act, right? And just by shifting an underlying assumption, it opens up a whole new domain of research. And so, there are people working on project problems that you're interested in, and there are people that are making certain assumptions that can help support you in the work that you're interested in. And so, it's out there. You just have to be willing to dip your toes into it.
Yeah, and to jump back in here with one more, I think the most important skill that I've learned is just how to make your research or what you find interesting presentable, because that's really the most important thing, is that you could have the most interesting data, but if you don't know how to tell people that or communicate that or have like a great way to visualize it, people probably won't get it or even try to. So when I was a research assistant doing a bunch of things about politics and elections, a lot of it, what I was working on was kind of like, how can I visualize all these, this data file best in like a small little graph to put out there so USC can put it on like Twitter, Instagram. And even though that seems pretty simple, it really takes a lot of thinking, like what colors should we use? What axes should we use? And then once I'm working at Live Nation, it's like, if someone asks me, can you put together a report to show me like how a certain city buys concert tickets or how a certain artist sells concert tickets? You can put together all the numbers that you want, but it's not going to be helpful unless you really know how to make that in a very digestible and almost aesthetic way.
Yeah, I definitely think in such an age of big data, one of the things we hear is like data, but what are you going to do with it? And I think definitely doing research and presenting it in that manner really helps you hone in on what the data is telling you and what you want to do with it. So thanks for touching on that, Oskar. So I know Amulya and I only conducted one thesis during our time at USC, but for Andrew and Oskar, I was wondering if you have some of your favorite past research topics and any interesting findings that you want to share with the group.
We recently, we did a theory piece on fake news and disinformation. We have a book chapter out recently, and we basically suggest that when things appear like they're coming from an in-group, in a way you expect it to, so it uses the same turn of phrase. So for example, we use Brexit. So there's a large disinformation campaign run on Brexit where people targeted specific identities, and because Facebook understands those identities and tags them, they're able to serve specific identities, served content. So for example, they would serve content that says, there'd be a cup of tea with the Big Ben and the double-decker bus, and it sounds like it's coming from an in-group member, and it directed people to basically vote leave, when in fact it was funded by a Canadian data firm. And so we go through and elucidate the proposed psychological mechanisms and basically why identity is so flexible and can be manipulated. And that theoretical piece has actually led to this persuasion piece that I described now that we're working on. And some of the future work is going to be looking at corporate logos in an interesting way. So if you see a corporate logo and it looks in the way you expect it to, does that make you more willing to buy a product? Or if it looks a little bit wrong, does that make you not want to buy a product? And these are rather interesting because they have real world implications for day-to-day life. And so it's taking sort of abstract theory and operationalizing it in a way that's relevant to everybody. And so if anybody's interested, you can find the book chapter. It's actually quite accessible and it's free on Kindle right now, the entire book on fake news and disinformation. So, no loss, check it out.
Yeah, I think that one of the most interesting things that I've been involved in is kind of the stuff that I've been working on recently, which is trying to see how the pandemic has affected people's mental health and kind of tracking that over time and tracking their different behaviors and perceptions. And it's really interesting to see how people's gender, education, income have really defined how this past year has hit different people. And just kind of, it's interesting to see this data because you're kind of anticipating what some of the real world effects might be in the next coming years. Like, is it going to widen the income disparity? Like, is there going to be even a starker class difference in this country from here on out? So just, again, kind of that's been really interesting to look at and kind of what I've been really liking about the department.
Thank you for sharing. I think one of the biggest notes out of this panel is how research has such real world implications. It's not just on a computer looking at things, it's trying to figure out why things are the way they are and how they're going to turn out. You guys definitely touched a lot about that. So I guess one last final wrap up question. We've touched a bit upon this, but for a final note for our attendees, why should students get involved in research? Like, what is your elevator pitch about why they should be involved?
Because it's interesting, like, as I feel like that's the most used word in this panel, but you should get involved because it's a great use of your time and it really sets you up for the future. Everything that you learn or look at, again, even if you don't like carry on those findings and do something related to what you spent so much time looking at, you'll always have that skill set. You'll always have that experience. And again, it's just something that a lot of what you look at is what other people find interesting. And even if it doesn't seem like it, even if it seems like only you're interested in this one specific thing, I promise you that there are like so many more people out there that you run into that you're going to be able to have like a cool conversation with them. And again, there's no downside in my looking at this. It's again, great use of time. You feel productive, you find things that seem interesting to you. And I would really recommend and if you don't know where to go, just find like a professor, find a department that kind of seems vaguely related to something that you're really interested in and just ask. Just like when I was working at the Center for a Political Future, I'm like, I want to work on political polling. This is so interesting. Like, how do I work in that department? And then when a spot opened up, they're like, hey, you're the one who's been bugging us about this for months. It seems like you should probably ask about that. So just put it out there what you want to do, and someone will know someone that can make that a reality for you.
Yeah, seconding everything that Oskar said, it is super interesting. But beyond that, I think research really gives you the opportunity to answer the questions that you have that nobody else has answered or even thought to ask. And so it's really about finding that niche of something that you're really interested in, that you go through your classes, you go through your daily life, and you say, like, I wonder what the answer to this is. I wonder if anyone's looked into this. And like, sometimes, yes, people have done a lot of research into it, and there's nothing wrong with continuing on that research or finding like a smaller niche where you can add to that research. But a lot of the times people just have not even thought about it. And that's your opportunity to go in there and formulate your research question and do it yourself. So that was a really great opportunity for me, because looking at something like diversity and marketing materials was a question that I had from the very beginning when I applied to colleges. And I always thought that this must be something that they have done a lot of research into, and that obviously colleges and universities that have spent so much money into their marketing must have done a lot of work. But after like further investigation into it, there was a space that was missing in the research field. And I was really happy to be able to fill that, even with my undergraduate research thesis, because the data that I got from my thesis could easily be built on by other people and just make the field more robust as a whole. So even if you feel like you have a really small question, a really big question, it doesn't matter. Doing the research fills those gaps within the field and just makes the whole sector, the whole industry a lot stronger, and you get to be a part of that change.
Nice. Yeah, I really like what Amoya said about bringing what's the pitch to do undergraduate research. You bring something to the table that's missing, and it will help you get to where you want to go in your future, regardless of whether it's in the academy or not. And don't be too picky. You can do a thesis where you can do research that you're really interested in, but you can also help answer other people's questions, and it will be equally as beneficial. And I think my connection was a little bit unstable, but I wanted to encourage students that are interested in research to simply ask their TAs, because most of your TAs are going to be graduate students or recently completed PhDs, and they will know people that are looking for RAs. And TAs are more than happy, and graduate students are more than happy to help undergraduate students find positions and find a good fit. And so, if anyone's interested, more than happy to email me. My email should be in the bio. You can find me on the webpage, or just ask any of your TAs. You have probably between 2 and 5 of them that are more than happy to help you find positions.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing. This panel made me wish I found out about research before I was a senior at USC, before I was almost graduated. So I hope this really touched a lot of our attendees and what they want to do. Thank you all for coming.